Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Inside of today's video, we're going to be ranking all 85 brawlers in the game right now, from the very worst all the way up to the very best. This is going to be a competitive tier list, so I will say it will differ depending on where you play in Brawl Stars. This is for the top master players, this is for competitive and everything else. So I took data from all competitions, from scrims, from also talking to pros, and also playing the game a bunch myself. I feel like I've got a really good understanding of the meta, so let's dive into it then. So starting off at the F tier, starting off with the worst brawler in the game, absolutely is Hank. So unfortunately, Hank just can't really do anything right now. It's just so easy to just let him burst his bubble and then just take him down within a flash. He's just terrible. Next up, we have Doug. So at least Doug has some use cases in Snake Prairie, Center Stage, or some other bushy maps. But for the most part, it's just so hard to approach someone as Doug. You just don't have any way to close the gap. Next, we have Bonnie. So she was only used once in World Finals. That was in Heist. It seemed to work out. But for the most part, she's just absolutely useless because her super's too predictable. You then got the fact that once you use your super, you just stay in there. Unlike brawlers like Mo, she has no hypercharge as well. Too many tanks, too much aggression. She can't deal with it. And the same goes with Mr. Peters. Just too much aggression. Too many brawlers with hypercharges that just run him down. Even up against his biggest counters, he just takes too long to get super. His penguins don't have the same value as they once used to have, so he's just fallen off. And lastly, in the F tier, we have Miko. He's remaining here because he hasn't got the DPS to keep up with the meta. He doesn't really have a purpose right now. There's no use case for him because other assassins are just way better than him, so he's just terrible. So now we're going to be moving on to the D tier. So these brawlers are sometimes good in very niche situations, but most of the time they're just well outclassed, and specifically if they've got a certain archetype, I don't know, like a tank counter, there's just better ones out there. But starting off with Grom. So with Grom, he received 2 buffs not too long ago with his damage and his supercharge rate, but that's not really helped him out in the meta. Still, the biggest problem is that his main attack is so easy to juke out, and especially since all the hypercharges, etc. So normally his brawlers that he counters, they've got hypercharges with a speed boost that can allow them to win that matchup still. So yeah, nothing's really changed about Grom. He's still terrible. Still, we have Bo. So again, the big problem with Bo is that he doesn't have consistent damage. He's often just overwhelmed, and there's not really much of a use case outside of Snake Prairie for him. Next up, we have Janet. So she has some rare use cases as a late pick in ranked because she can counter those other squishy brawlers, and she's got good vision on maps like Snake Prairie, double swoosh with the gadget. But still, more often than not, there's just too many brawlers that can run it down too easily against her. So in the D tier, we have Bull. So his hypercharge definitely carries him a lot. Without it, it'd be one of the worst brawlers in the game. He's only really good in Heist on base race maps like Hot Potato. Outside of that, I feel like he's just too predictable and too much of an easy. Next up in the D tier, we have Pam. And Pam has to be one of the most forgotten brawlers in this meta. She's just never played it in ranked. She's never played it in competitive. Pam used to always be the go-to brawler in game modes like Hot Zone, for example, or really defensive modes and maps like double swoosh. But Pam just doesn't get the value anymore. She doesn't have the damage. She's just an easy target, and she's just going to farm other brawlers' hypercharges while she doesn't really have one, so she's not really great at anything. Next up, we have Sam, and again, Sam has some good niche situations where if there's some low DPS brawlers, he can counter them with his healing trait. But outside of that, like, the meta is just completely damaged, right? You think of the top brawlers in the meta like Surge, Clancy, etc. They just delete Sam, so for me, you just hardly ever use him. Next up, we have Fang, and it's the same situation again with Fang. Nothing has changed in terms of buffs with him. His hypercharge takes absolutely forever to get, and it's not even as good as it used to be. Fang isn't even good at countering snipers anymore. There's just too many ways to get away from Fang's super. I don't know. If you play low level, he's good, but in competitive, he's absolutely terrible. Next up in the D tier, we have Ems. So if you watch my streams, you knew this was coming because Ems just doesn't have a purpose in the meta and hasn't for a long time. If you think about it, she's a tank counter, but she gets overwhelmed by tanks. And you think about it as well, her hypercharge is terrible. It adds nothing. She often gets outranged and outclassed on so many different maps. If you're just playing her blindly in ladder, you can get value, but competitive, there's no reason to use Ems, and there hasn't been a reason to use Ems for a long time. So absolutely, in my eyes, she's D tier. If you play casually, Ems looks really good. Elsewhere, she's just a free walk and kill. Next up, we have Maisie. So the damage buff literally did nothing to Maisie. She was used once in World Finals. Outside of that, she's just so hard to use. Her main attack is just really easy to avoid, and you don't even get the chaining potential that you used to get with Maisie, so you just no point really using her. So in the D tier, we have Charlie. So she received a couple of buffs with her damage and her hypercharge rate, which she's helped her out a little bit, but I still feel like she's an easy kill most of the time. There's just better lane brawlers out there that are just more consistent than her. And lastly in the D tier, we have Edgar. So now I'm going to get a lot of hate for it, but Edgar is just not using competitive whatsoever right now. And even in his use cases where he could counter throwers and low DPS brawlers, there's still just better assassins and tanks in the meta. So his usefulness has just gone right down. He's definitely towards the bottom of the meta. So now we're going to move it on to C tier brawlers. So most of the time there's a better option than these brawlers. So I'll just say they're pretty balanced / on the weaker side. So we're going to be starting off with Rosa. So she's definitely dropped down in the meta quite a bit. You even see on her best maps like Center Stage and Sneaker Fields, there's normally better options, but she's still a good sleeper pick. Next up we have Poco. So Poco's usefulness has gone right down. I don't even see him paired with tanks really at all in ranked right now, especially on Hot Zone where he used to always be good on. He's just not really having that impact. I'd say on ladder you can abuse him with the Tune of Fort gadget and with multiple tanks and just run it down, but outside of that there's not really a point using him in ranked. Next up in the C tier we have Draco, and we've seen Draco in the World Finals on Double Swoosh and it seemed to work out, but that was only because there was just 0 DPS on their enemy team, whilst DPS is at the forefront of this meta. There's just too much of that going on, which just wrecks Draco. But again, there's the rare instance where it might work out in a Hot Zone or a grassy map. Next on the C tier, we have Jackie. So again, Jackie is often just going to get pinched out too easily, but there are some good use cases for her in Canal Grande. Any Brawl map, you can easily play her because her hypercharge is still pretty good. Next on the C tier, we have Eve, and I just never feel like Eve is actually that good in the meta, mainly because her projectile is so slow and she's just getting power crept by other abilities in the game. You've got Juju, you've got RT that can walk over water now, you've got Angelo, and whenever I see Eve being played, especially in competitive, her lane is always lost, so I just don't really like her. Next on the C tier, we have Ash, and Ash has definitely got a lot better with the recent buff, where he's able to get more rage from taking more damage. I'm finding him a lot more useful on those bushy maps again, but still, I don't think it's enough to push him above the C tier, mainly because there's just better tanks out there that will destroy him in a 1v1, like Frank, like Daryl, etc. Next on the C tier, we have Griff, and again, another brawler that's just okay. He hasn't really got a lot going for him in the meta. He's more of a counter pick option to open up the map, and he still can be pretty good against tanks, but I still feel like he's not a good enough tank counter out there. He's just average. Next up, we have Brock, and he received a HP buff, which I thought would have helped him a little bit. It did a tiny bit, but when you think about Brock, right, in Knockout and Bounty, there's just far too many good snipers right now at the top of the meta, so you can't really win that matchup. And again, there's just so much aggression going on, which is his biggest weakness, because his main attack is so hard to hit at the mid-range, so anything aggressive's got to counter him. He's not really found his place in the meta yet. Next in the C tier, we have El Primo, and just because of the reason that he counters so many of the top assassins and tanks, he's pretty decent in the meta, so countering Frank, Daryl, Kenji, etc. He's good in Brawl as well, good in some high situations. He's just okay. Next in the C tier, we have Shelly, so I'm not really seeing that too much in competitive right now, but because of the maps and the meta at the top, it's the reason why she's still somewhat relevant. You know, Kenji, Daryl, she still has a decent matchup into. If they start to fall off, then Shelly would definitely drop down a lot. So next up in the C tier, we have Gale. So this is a bold prediction. I just don't think he's the same anymore. I'm not getting the same value with him because he got a nerf. Basically, from his basics, he can't charge up his super as frequently. This then made it so he gets his hypercharge a lot less frequently as well. And just everything considered, he just doesn't overwhelm the map the way he used to. So I'm not really finding him being a great tank counter. I think he could drop lower than the C tier. Next up in the C tier, we have Jessie. So another brawler. People are just scared putting lower on their tier list because, again, I'm not really seeing Jessie pop up in competitive games whatsoever. She's only really good in Hot Zone, but I'm still finding there's too many throwers in the meta. There's too many longer range brawlers in Hot Zone as well, like Byron, like Mo, that can just abuse her too much. I just don't really find her too useful. So in the C tier, we have Tara. So it's all dependent on the map, in my opinion. On Latch Stop, Snake Prairie, she's a really good asset, but still on most maps in Gem Grab and Brawl where she excels, there's just better lanes out there, so I'm not really seeing her too much in the meta. Next up, we have Mortis, and the hypercharge rate definitely turned him down a lot. I didn't think it was going to do too much, but it definitely did. The hypercharge itself is busted, one of the best in the game, but because Mortis just sucks fundamentally, it's actually so hard for him to get his hypercharge, and by the time he's got his hypercharge, he's just fed everyone else their supers, so he's only really good as a counter pick. Next up in the C tier, we have Luz, so another brawler which is just kind of okay into most things. When you're looking for a tank counter, he can be pretty good, but then normally there's a better one. In terms of hot zone, normally you can only pick him at the end of draft because he's just too easily countered. His main attack is just so hard to hit, and then with the supercharged rate nerfs that he's got in the past, it's not really allowed him to develop himself back in the hot zone meta, so he's just kind of mid. Next up in the C tier, we have Chuck, and of course Chuck is still S tier in Heist, but I'm still finding in Heist there's just better brawlers right now. There's just more hypercharges, etc. But still, because he's good in Heist, he'll always be around C tier. So next up in the C tier, we have Ruffs. Even with the addition of his hypercharge, I just don't find it makes him that good of a brawler. If you think the hypercharge itself, it's not actually for him either, it's for his teammates. And Ruffs' standalone brawler, it's going to take him forever to get his super because people will just beat him in lane too often. And again, I'm not really seeing the pros really find broken strategies with Ruffs right now because there's just better lanes and better options out there. It's just too easy to counter. So next up in C tier, we have Leon, and Leon definitely isn't a bad brawler. It's just a problem that he's just not great in any situations, so he's just average. So most of the time there's just better options, but again, a good Leon can definitely make a good impact on the game. His hypercharge still is pretty good, but it's all about getting that super because getting the first super is a big problem. So next up we have Willow. She's going to be one of the most forgotten brawlers, mainly because there's just better throwers out there. Doesn't mean she's bad, just means she's average. So for example, if you want to play Brawl, Gem Grab, or Hot Zone, there's normally like Barley, Larry, Dynamite, etc. If you want to play Knockout and Bounty, there's normally Tick, Sprout, and all these other throwers. So she's just kind of there when those other brawlers are banned. So next from the C tier, we have BB. So she's kind of just average at everything right now. I don't really see her being played much in competitive, but she's still like okay. Her hypercharge allows her to win a lot of different interactions where without it she wouldn't be able to. She'd just be getting abused. And I think at least like she's good on maps with a lot of wolves. I think outside of that she's not really great. So next up in the C tier, we have Sprout. So there are a few maps where he's pretty dominant on, but outside of like Bell's Rock and a few other situations, I still find when I play Sprout, I'm still getting overwhelmed so easily. You know, for example, I used to last pick Sprout a lot in ranked and beat those snipers, but now those snipers have hypercharges and just abilities that can overwhelm him still. I just don't find him that great anymore. Next up in the C tier, we have Buzz. So I don't really see him played much in competitive anymore. His hypercharge is still really good. It's just the fact that it still takes a little bit of a while to charge up, and in 1v1 interactions, it doesn't seem like he wins too many of those anymore, and still a lot of high DPS brawlers at the top of the meta, which makes it really hard for him to thrive. Next up in the C tier, we have Nanny. So Nanny's dropped off a lot. The only use case really for her is to counter other sharpshooters on long range maps, you know, to counter Piper, Gus, etc. But still, I don't think she counters them that well anymore, and the hypercharge doesn't really do anything for Nanny. If anything, makes her worse. So yeah, I just don't get Nanny in this meta. Next on the C tier, we have B. So again, B is just the definition of mid right now. Like a good B player can make things work, but more often than not, there's a better mid, and still, because B takes 4 shots to get super, I find her getting overwhelmed a lot. Next up in the C tier, we have Chester. So again, Chester is a pretty balanced brawler right now. He received a couple of nerfs a couple of months ago, and it's definitely turned him down a lot because in competitive, I think he pretty much was never used in the World Finals because there's just better damage dealers out there. But still, that's not saying that he's a bad brawler right now. It's just more often than not, you just rather go another DPS brawler. And then lastly, in the C tier, we have Colt. So again, in Heist, he's a very strong brawler, but I'm finding myself as a meta to develop some more brawlers, get hypercharges. He's dropping down even more. It's just too hard to use Colt against good players as well, and again, he's only good in Heist. So now we're going to be moving on to the B tier brawlers. So these will excel in multiple game modes, and they're just better on average than a lot of brawlers in the meta. So first off in the B tier, we have Crow. So of course, he's really strong in the Heist meta still, and I still find him pretty useful on maps with a lot of bushes, etc. So he's always going to be decent in the meta because of that hypercharge in Heist. So next up in the B tier, we have Lily. So she's dropped down a little bit in the meta, but she'll always be good because of her broken vanish gadget, especially in game modes like Gem Grab, or if you're facing off against squishier brawlers, she'll just have an absolute field day. And again, Gem Grab, she's so good. You just got to make sure you're using that gadget effectively. So next up in the B tier, we have Spike. So again, I wanted to put him kind of like in the B minus, just because the HP buff actually helped him out a little bit more than I give him credit for. I still don't think he's good enough to play in competitive, but I still feel like he counters other lane brawlers a lot better now because of that HP buff. So next up with the B tier, we have Berry. So he's the definition of underrated in this meta. He can be paired with so many brawlers in Hot Zone, for example. He did receive a nerf to his super charge rate from the amount of healing he does, but still ever since he's able to cycle through supers a lot, and he can get so much value in other game modes as well, you know, where Barley and Larry are pretty good. Berry's still pretty decent as well. Next up with a B tier, we have Cole. So he's actually forgotten by a lot of people, but the reason why he's B tier because if a good player gets his hands on Cole, he can make a lot of things happen. As a late pick in a lot of different situations, he can be really, really strong because he's still got a lot of versatility with Cole. If he has a bad matchup, you can switch to the fire gadget. If you've got a good matchup, i.e. on a thrower or a sniper, you can use flying hook, and he's really good on a certain few maps like Canal Grande, so absolutely still in the meta. Next with a B tier, we have a Tick. So Tick is just always going to be good in the meta just because he's dominant on knockout and bounty because he will outrange all of the other throwers. But I'm starting to see still like there's a lot of aggression going on, which really does hurt Tick, and I'm finding, you know, brawlers like Juju might actually replace Tick in the knockout meta. The next up with a B tier, we have Meg. So ever since she received a couple of nerfs, I've not really been noticing her too much, but she's just like okay at everything. Like she's still pretty decent in knockout and bounty if you need a bit of HP. She's still pretty good in hot zone. Again, she can use her HP and DPS to make things work, but again, I'm still finding that she's not like the greatest in any situation either, so I think B is where she's at. Next up in the B tier, we have Gray, and still he's always going to be pretty good in the meta, mainly because of the walking cane gadget allows him just to get a lot of good kills in knockout and bounty, and his super just allows him just to really counter those snipers and throwers, so for that reason he'll always have a place. Next up we have Squeak, and Squeak is really good later on in the draft, mainly because he lacks the DPS against some of these other tanks in the meta. His hypercharge isn't like anything crazy, but it's still pretty decent, and I just find him being a really good counter to all of those squishy brawlers, so he definitely has a place in the meta. Next up in the B tier, we have Mandy. So people are still forgetting that Mandy technically got a buff even after all of the recent reworks and whatever going on. It's still a buff from beforehand, so she's easily got to be at least B tier. She's really good on those longer range maps. I'm still finding she's not good enough to be outside of knockout and bounty right now, but yeah, B tier is where she's at. So in the B tier, we have Lola. So we saw the use rate of her go through the roof in World Finals, but the main reason for that is because she's super versatile in draft, meaning there's not really a lot of counters and you can always just safely pick her, which goes to show that she's still good in the meta, right? The recent damage buff has definitely helped her out, but it's nothing crazy. Like she's not going to walk around and just carry the game. It's just because she's just good. So next up we have 8-Bit. He's recently got a hypercharge, and I don't think that's really affected him too much in the meta. Like it's good to have a hypercharge, it will help him in some situations, but the hypercharge super itself is pretty terrible. It doesn't really help him out whatsoever, but still 8-Bit's good in heist, he's good as a gem carrier, he's good in some situations in bounty as well, so he'll forever be in the B tier. Next up in the B tier, we have Dynamite. So even though there's a few assassins in the meta like Mo and Kenji, he's still pretty good because if you can escape those, he can counter so many different lanes. He's got a really toxic stun gadget, his hypercharge is still really good, so I find him being really annoying in ranked still. I end up banning him a lot if I'm playing like Gem Grab or Brawl with a map with a lot of walls. So next up in the B tier, we have Sandy, and Sandy's still pretty toxic in the meta, especially on those grassy maps. Double swoosh, center stage, you can get a lot of value out of Sandy, and the hypercharge takes a little while to get, but if you get that hypercharge super, you can turn around the game so easily. It's one of the best in the game, so for that reason, absolutely beat it. For the B tier, we have Otis. So again, another really underrated brawler. He recently got a hypercharge, which is pretty good, but it's very bugged right now. It doesn't actually stun a lot of brawlers like a Cole super, and it's also nerfed because it only shoots 3 projectiles instead of 4. But I think once that's fixed, I think he could be A tier easily. There's so many like grassy maps where he's really valuable with the vision gear on. You've seen that in World Finals already without the hypercharge. I think people are sleeping on Otis. Next up in the B tier, we have Pearl, and she's just a definition of underrated as well, mainly because the pros just love going Pearl on any passive map in knockout, bounty. She's just really good because if you combine her fully heated up attack with her gadget, she can just one-shot so many different brawlers, and she's a good counter to those aggro brawlers as well, because you think of it, even a passive map like Last Stop, it's just so easy for her to win lane. So in B tier, we have Colette. So we've seen her used a lot in World Finals just because of how scared people were of assassins, whatever else, but I will say really she's only still good in heist. I don't really see a use case for her in like Brawl, Gem Grab. She's just not that good in the meta. The hypercharge allows her to deal so much damage and stack a lot of supers though, so she's always going to be in and around the B tier. The next up with the B tier, we have Cordelia. So the right player can absolutely do work on this brawler, mainly because he can abuse so many matchups with the jump gadget. His super allows him to win so many matchups in the Shadow Realm. He's got a good hype charge as well, and again, underrated because in World Finals we saw him pop off a lot in Hot Zone, so he definitely has a use case in this meta. So next up in the B tier, we have Buster. So again, he's in and around the A/B tier. He wasn't really used too much in World Finals, and again, I just don't think the meta completely suits Buster right now, but still, if it's a Bushy map, he can definitely still be pretty good because of that shield. And the good thing about Buster is that your typical tank counters don't really counter Buster, so for that reason, he'll always be in and around the A tier. Next up in the B tier, we have Kit. So Kit is only really useful in Knockout and Bounty, and if you pair it with like a Daryl or something aggressive. But Kit is a standalone brawler I just think is so overrated. The pros seem to really like Kit on like Heist, on Hot Zone, and I just don't really see it personally. So I think Kit should be around the B tier. Lastly in the B tier, we have Nita. So again, a lot of people forget about Nita, but she's a really good solid pick in Gem Grab, Brawl Ball, any grass. Nita's going to be pretty good, and the main reason being is because her hype charge only takes 2 supers to get. So you can consistently just cycle through those bears, push the opponent back, and get a lot of value. So yeah, she's easily around the B tier. So now I'm going to move on to your A tier brawlers. So these are going to be a cut above most of the meta. They're going to be better than most brawlers on most maps and situations. And the first brawler is Melody. So Melody is still pretty slept on because I think she is pretty high skill cap. It takes a good Melody to make stuff happen. We saw in World Finals, Sai Tampo's Melody was absolutely insane. And again, people are just kind of forgetting about her utility. She's so good in Heist and so good against those squishier brawlers. I still find sometimes there's too much DPS for her, but a good Melody can still make things happen. Next up in the A tier, we have Belle, and she is the master of versatility. And that's why I put her so high in this meta, because in World Finals, she was one of the most picked and banned brawlers in the top 10, going to show that you can play her pretty much everywhere. You can play her in Heist, you can play her in Bounty, Knockout, any long range map, you can play Belle because there actually isn't too many bad matchups for her. So yeah, she's just consistently good. Next up in the A tier, we have Barley, and I don't think it's really dropped off that much in the meta, to be honest. He still has a lot of really good maps in the rotation. I think that's one of the things that's carrying him right now. He has a decent hype charge. Takes him a long while to get it, but once he does get it, it just equals so much map control. You think of Open Business, think of Pinball Dreams. There's a lot of great matchups, and because of his builds, he can swap out gadgets, star powers, etc. to really just make the matchup in his favor. So next up in the A tier, we have the Twins, and I still think they're just on the cusp of the top 10. The HP nerf didn't really do a lot to them. They've still got a really toxic star power, especially against tanks, which allows them just to be this super crazy thrower. Like, most throwers are countered by assassins or high HP brawlers, but with that star power, the Twins can really take over. So until that's fixed, I think they'll easily be minimum A tier. Next up in the A tier, we have Piper, and because of how much damage Piper does and the hype charge as well, she'll forever be an A tier brawler in my opinion, because there's just too many good matchups for her, and a lot of it just depends on whether you can just hit shots. She's always going to be really good in Knockout and Bounty, a decent gem carry as well. Any open map, she's going to be pretty good. So A tier is where she's at. So in the A tier, we have Penny. So she's starting to creep up the meta a lot. Her hype charge is pretty good. It's nothing broken, but it's definitely toxic if you don't have the right counter. I still think there's still a few too many throws at the top of the meta to make her like top 10. And the range buff definitely did help her out a lot. I'm starting to see her a lot more in like Gem Grab, Hot Zone, but she's not like this carry brawler, but because of her versatility, she's absolutely A tier. So next up in the A tier, we have Amber, and boy do the pros love playing Amber right now, mainly because there's not a lot of counters to her. You think if there's an assassin, you can switch over to Dancing Flames. If there's long range brawlers, you can go with Fire Starter's gadget, and for that reason, she's really versatile. She's just got good damage output as well. She can win so many matchups with the Vision Gear, and then of course, if there's a really annoying matchup, she can just burn the grass as well. There's so much to like about Amber, and she's been played so much in competitive. Next up in the A tier, we have Rico, and because he's a very map dependent brawler, I couldn't put him in the S tier, but you think of like Pinball Dreams, Triple Dribble, Hot Potato. There's so many good matchups for him and maps. He's absolutely S tier broken on those because of the hypercharge. You've got a broken multiple launcher gadget, which allows him to counter his counters. I don't know, Rico's pretty brain dead in his meta, so right maps, he's absolutely S tier. In the A tier, we have Max, and Max will always be in and around the top 10, especially with the hype charge that she got recently. It enables you and your teammate to get 3/4 of your super, which is so good. And because Max is just good against a lot of the snipers in the meta as well, she's pretty good. And you can play Max pretty much everywhere. So for that reason, A tier. Next up in the A tier, we have Gene, and he's still going to be one of the most consistent brawlers to draft, mainly because you take a look at all the meta brawlers at the top, they haven't got a gadget that can tank his pull. And that's when you see Gene drop off, is when you see all of these gadget brawlers, I don't know, like Penny for example, start to come up, then Gene drops off. But still, in World Finals, he's been played so much. Bounty, Knockout, Gem Grab, the Vision Gear is so broken on him, the Mythic Gear is so good as well. Yeah, he's the perfect draft brawler. 78 we have RT, and boy is he still so strong in his meta. He got a recent rework where his super's able to float over water, which doesn't really help him out a lot, but still, RT just absolutely wrecks any form of tank. And of course, being a sniper as well, that just means he can kind of do it all. He's really good at Knockout and Bounty, and you know, he does get countered a little bit by his fellow snipers, but still a good RT can get a couple of taps in and kill them with ease. And again, no brawler that is aggro can push RT because of the recent rework to his gadget where he gets it for free. He's just a perfect draft brawler. The next up in the A tier, we have Angelo, and I personally want to put him in the S tier just because of how annoying he is, especially on those water-based maps like Bridge to Far, Safe Zone, basically all the highest maps. He's really good. Knockout and Bounty is super good. He's got two really strong gadgets. Deals 4k damage with one shot, which you can just auto-aim and hold, and then just run up to people and hit most of the time. He's got a really good hyper charge. Takes a while to get, but it's super good. There's just so much to like about Angelo. I think people are sleeping on him a lot. He's absolutely one of the best brawlers. And lastly in the A tier, we have Frank, and I easily could have put him in the S tier as well, but I did want to put like 15 brawlers in the S tier. But Frank, even with the recent damage nerf, he still absolutely cracks. It's the fact that you think you're about to defeat a Frank, and because he has so much HP, a good Frank just knows how to abuse his recent rework mechanic, and he can just melt people. And especially if you combine his gadget that deals additional damage, and you've got the power grab at star power as well, he can shred through literally everything. There's hardly anything that truly counters him in the meta, so good Frank will absolutely dominate. Now we're going to be moving on to your S tier brawlers. So these brawlers, most of the time you just pick them equal wins because they're so good in multiple game modes, they're so versatile, etc. And we're going to be starting off with Stu. So Stu recently got a hyper charge, and everyone was a bit skeptical because it seemed like it took forever to charge, but boy is it busted. It's so good. Brawl, Gem Grab, Hot Zone, you're going to get so much value out of Stu as well. He's got two versatile star powers, two versatile gadgets as well. He's just so dominant with that hyper charge. It's crazy. You do need good internet connection though to make it work, but the pros are just abusing Stu. Next up in the S tier though, we have Byron. So again, Byron's so good because you can play him everywhere. He recently got a bug fix, so if you guys are unaware, there was a bug that made him need 10 hits instead of 9. It then got reverted, so he's just back to his former state like a month ago. So for that reason, he's absolutely really good. It only takes 3 pieces of ammo to get his super, which you can just use aggressively, defensively, in any way, shape or form. He's got a really good gadget as well, and it's actually pretty hard for even assassins to approach Byron just because of how quickly he cycles super and how much damage he does. And of course, he's a really good healer. There's a lot of good synergies for him in the meta, so absolutely he's still S tier. Next up in the S tier, we have Surge. So he received a nerf to his hyper charge rate, but that only means it takes like 5 more hits to get his hyper charge, which in theory I don't think it really changes too much. He still gets a couple of hyper charges per game, but it still didn't change anything with his damage, his HP or anything like that. So his good matchups, he's just absolutely gonna abuse. It's the fact that, you know, you got brawlers like, I don't know, Mortis or any type of assassin, they hardly ever stand a chance against Surge unless they make a really bad misplay, because you've also got a gadget that gives you additional ammo as well. He's just busted right now. So next up in the S tier, we have Gus, and again for the casuals, Gus won't seem anything like broken, but for the pros, they're playing so much Gus in World Finals. He was played a lot, and right now I'm just playing him so much in ranked. He does a lot of good damage. So if you're wondering, he received a damage buff a couple of months ago, and then that allowed him to get more damage with his gadget as well, and he's just going over the meta right now. He can face off against his fellow snipers. Formerly he would get countered by them. You think of Gus in Gem Grab, he's one of the best mid brawlers. In Knockout and Bounty, he's one of the best lanes. You think of other situations, well, as long as it's long range map, there's going to be some type of way you can play Gus. I'm playing him everywhere right now, so make sure to play him because he's being slept on. So now moving into the 5th best brawler in the game right now, I went with Daryl. So the reason why he's actually jumped up a little bit is because of the hypercharge. The hypercharge super itself doesn't really do a lot, but the stat boost really help him win some interactions. But it's just Daryl. He's a tank that can be super versatile and still take down his tank counters because you think he's got the knockback that can win that interaction. And, you know, other tanks you can only really play on bushy maps, but Daryl, you can play him everywhere. You can play him in Knockout, Bounty, as a late pick. He's so dangerous. Those 2 roles that rework just completely broke him. He's absolutely S tier. Now moving on to the 4th best brawler in the game right now, I went with Clancy. So he got a couple of nerfs. I think like 3 or 4 nerfs in total. but I don't think that was enough to tone him down. So what they focused on is making Clancy weaker in his early stages, but that's definitely not the problem. It's once he gets to level 3, he just takes over the map. The speed boost, the damage boost, the super damage is insane. It's just the fact that as well, any type of tank assassin stands 0 chance against Clancy. Even if the Clancy misplays, they can hardly ever kill him, so he's just very overwhelming. In World Finals, the pros played him so much on bushy maps, etc. And I know a good player can, you know, keep the distance against Clancy and not feed him, but it literally requires you to play perfectly to counter him. If one of your teammates just feed him once, it's pretty much over. So for that reason, he's absolutely celestial. So now jumping into the 3rd best brawler in the game right now, I went with Juju, and again, people are doing the same what happened with Angelo and Melody. So essentially, these brawlers were really good, but because of different mechanics and take a little bit more getting used to, they underrated these brawlers. But with Juju, it's the same. So she's got so many good things about her. So of course, you've got the ability when she stands in grass, she shoots longer than Piper, which allows her to win so many matchups on so many different maps. It's so toxic. And then you've got the fact that one of her gadgets, you can go invisible when you're in grass, which is just bizarre to me. So you could just pop invis whenever you want and then just triple tap so many squishy brawlers. You then got Gree as well, who isn't really that good, but he's got a lot of HP, and if he does get one tap onto someone with the slow star power, he will probably kill them, or at least allow you or your teammates to finish off the kill. So there's just so much versatility to her as well. You know, she can walk over water. The list goes on. Absolutely yes. Now moving into the 2nd best brawler in the game right now, I went with Mo, and some people are telling me that Mo isn't good anymore, or you can't use Mo on open maps. I just don't know what people are saying, because to me he's absolutely busted still. So good. I'm just playing him whenever I can in ranked, and most time he is banned, but people are still sleeping on him. So the reason why Mo is so good is because his damage output is still crazy. He can still wall peek with his main attack so easily, and it's just the fact that his super is busted, like beyond broken. The knockback is just crazy to me. It's the fact that any brawler around, I don't know, 6k 7k HP, he will pretty much kill if he has a super, and the fact that you can auto aim that as well. The knockback means you have no chance in defending yourself. There's just so much going for Mo, and even on long range maps, right, people switch over to his other star power, which the other star power, all it's supposed to do is increase your drill movement speed, but it actually makes it so his range is larger. So that's why you see in World Finals, people switch star powers, so then he could actually fight against other long-range brawlers and knock out on bounty. So yeah, he's still got versatility to him. Yeah, Mo is broken. This rat is so annoying. Please nerf him. Now we're going to be moving on to the best brawler in the game right now. We have Kenji. So Kenji did receive some nerfs with his supercharge rate and his star power, but I don't think that really did anything to him. So I will say that he's not like completely broken. Like he does have some counters to him, but for the most part, he can still beat those counters because he has that shield star power. He's got a gadget that can give him back life. The healing trait, I think, is the most disgusting thing. It's the fact that he gets so much healing whenever he's fighting anyone, and then the super gives him healing as well. His super's so hard to avoid. He deals so much damage. His reload speed is so quick. There's so much to like about Kenji, and the pros were just playing him so much in World Finals. Even in really unfavorable matchups, they pretty much had to play Kenji, or else if the opponent got it and just got like one good matchup, it was pretty much game over. And you saw Kenji even being used in Heist, so that's like a brawler like Mortis being good in Heist. That's when you know Kenji is good in the meta. So that's going to be it for today's video, guys. Here's the tier list on the screen right here. Also, I'll briefly talk about Shade. I think Shade's going to be absolutely broken if he's released in his current form. Yeah, let's just not talk about that brawler for now, okay? We've still got another week to prepare for that, but yeah, that's going to be it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know whether you would have changed anything in the comment section below. I don't think there was really anything that's really bad, right? I just think you've got to look at it at a point of view like, would you play this brawler in ranked at all, in competitive at all? And a lot of these D tier, F tier brawlers, they're just not being played, even C tier, at all in the competitive meta. So that's going to be it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.